I've still got a minute left before I can announce welcome. Yeah. I am like Johnny on the clock spot here.
Jason on the spot.
Jason on the spot.
I know we're ready for your
They're great. They just did so well. John, did you see the picture of Allison at Hayworth Field? I didn't. I just tabbed it there, but she said it's an amazing facility. Yeah, crazy amazing.
They're looking at us over there.
We'll chat. It'll be fun. I'll tell you more about it. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and those of us who are attending online virtually. Welcome tonight. Welcome to the Lakewood City Council study session for Monday, April 25, 2022. We have a number of great, exciting items tonight. And first, we have a review of the facility renaming policy with Ms. Dodsworth.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Whalen. We have gone through this many times, but just as a recap is that starting in 2021, the city implemented its first review process for the renaming policy. And we learned a lot from it. And so we went back to the park board on several occasions to talk about it. Then when the work programs were being approved in January, LHAB had wanted to have some input on the policy. So we created a joint meeting with them, went through it again, and then came back to council to share those recommendations. What you have in your packet is a copy of the updated packet, a copy of the resolution, which has some changes to it, and then kind of an internal or the application process, which we've updated the application so that individuals who might be requesting a name or a renaming would have the ability to provide more information to us. Of course, last time the packet was for Claudia, who we all knew and had lots of information on, but there could be an individual that we're not as familiar with. So we would want to get some more information. And then just an internal checklist so that it's really clear to staff who are processing this what the steps are so that we don't have any confusion towards the end. When we presented this to council in April, it was suggested that it come back for some rewording. And so here I am with my pen, happy to take notes regarding any changes that you might want to add. I think that the park board and LHAB listened to you and talked through the process and included most of the things that you wanted to see changed. But of course, this is your policy and your resolution. So we're happy to add or change anything that you're interested in.
Anyone? Mr. Anderson?
So as liaison to the Parks Board, I'd just like to commend their effort. They were very thoughtful. They covered the areas that we were concerned about. I can't even recall specifically what each of them was now, but as far as getting public input, setting a barrier for a threshold rather than a barrier for consideration, and yet making things attainable and leaving open. One of the things was leaving open the option of the council taking action on its own, not having to go through the committee. Were all considered, and I think they adopted some good changes to what was basically a pretty good proposal to start with. So.
Mr. Boki and then Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll ask the Parks Board, how did you come up with 600 people for a signature? Is that 1%? Is that the idea?
That was our idea.
Okay.
Basically 1% of the population. And their thought there was that it would take, it didn't have to be a phenomenal outpouring, but there had to be a broad base of support for the idea.
And the other idea too, just to add on to that is that when a group or an organization or an individual was out getting signatures and talking to people about it, there in itself was additional public outreach, right? That people would start talking about it and thinking about it before it came to a public hearing. So, so that was part of it as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mary, thank you for bringing this in. I think they've done a really good job, both committees that looked at it to do that and captured a lot of what we were hoping to see or in some cases not see, to be able to go and do that. I do have some questions that in some cases are more maybe wordsmithing than substantive, but the resolution, it would seem that we could do something with a few more whereases. I think the whole idea of renaming and of naming things in the city, that we should indicate that in the whereases that there is a purpose to that, and that appropriately naming things does contribute to the heritage and things and the in our vision for the community of where we're inspired by our history and heritage. I think there are a couple of whereases that you might put in there that talks about why name anything in any way, about being able to go and do that. And it might be that while the first whereas talks about us having the occasion to do it, I think that there's a whereas that we can say, just based on the history, that the public may have occasion to want to do it. And I think that's as much of a reason why we're doing this as any, and to let folks know that it's not that the council want to rename something. It's that if the community wants to rename something, that we could have a whereas that would set that. I don't have any specific words that I would look to give you. They're more thoughts that were there. And whereases, we sometimes just go past the whereases to the substance of resolutions and ordinances, but I think that in this case, it would be important is that this is something that speaks to heritage. In section 1, paragraph B, in 1C, I just don't know whether that it maybe there should be, it should, instead of saying remains, could say will remain. I don't know. It's sounds better to me to be able to go that. And then in section 1, paragraph 6, it certainly said avoid undue commercialization of the park and or recreational facility. And since the scope is broader than parks and recreational facilities, that includes streets and this building. Well, I come here every Monday for recreation. It's I think maybe adding street or city facility in there that maybe is something that was on on the mind of the Parks Board as they were doing this work, but I think the intent is, no matter what it is that we're naming, to do that. Okay. And then in section 1, paragraph E,
Which paragraph? I'm sorry, I didn't-
section 1, paragraph E, it's the naming approval process
Oh.
section. And it isn't real clear to me who's going to do what in these 5 steps. In other words, the application is going to go to the city manager, and there's going to be advertise the intent to name a park or facility or consider proposed names. Are we going to put that out saying the council is going to do that? That's fine. And then the council refer the completed application to appropriate staff and committee for review. Is the council going to do that, or is the city manager going to do that before it automatically comes to us? And, it sort of seems like that's not necessarily something that has to come to us. If the city manager receives one that meets all the criteria, this resolution would indicate that maybe he should look to do that.
I mean, you'd say the city council will, through staff, utilize the
Yeah.
following guidelines for approval,
Yeah.
or something like that. And go to
And the one that is, I think needs clarification, that there is the take public comment, the purpose of which is to represent the broad range of demographics and interests of city residents. I think it doesn't say public hearing. It doesn't say hold a public hearing. But in other places, there is sort of some mention of some public hearing language. So this, the who's are going to do that? I'm almost certainly, if we're doing this, we'll get public comment in our public comment things, but I think that there is the best intent would be, if it's going to be the Parks and Recreation Board, that is the group that for a specific, and in the vast majority of events are the ones we refer this to, indicate that that's who's going to take, and whether we want them to hold a hearing or whether we want them to just take public comment. We can be clearer that way. And up before I mentioned in there was the section where it talked about avoiding undue commercialization. And I'm trying to decide how that guideline jives with, on the application, asking the applicant, how will the name change add to the commercialization? It's almost like we're encouraging to talk about how it will add to commercialization while we're trying to avoid commercialization. I think somewhere we can be consistent, and maybe it's a question of not how will it add, it's just how will it impact commercialization. There's no requirement, it almost implies a requirement that it should add to commercialization, and I don't think that's going to be the intent to do that. And then the last thing in that same thing, it says, what assets or resources will be provided to contribute to the cost associated with a name change? And I'm not comfortable with saying that if you group of citizens want to propose a name change, that they should also include how they're going to fund it. what we really want to know is what are the costs? You know, what are the costs associated with it, but not how they're going to pay for it and what are they going to bring to it. So it's a little bit of, don't want to encourage or imply that unless you're going to bring money to the table, don't even bother. Because I think there are.
Unless you can buy 600 signatures. I'm kidding.
Yeah, well,
people do.
bring 600 signatures, but I don't, you know, I don't necessarily think that the expectation should be implied that we expect the applicant to fund costs associated with the name change. I think that should be looked at, and that's going to be a consideration for us. I just don't like the way that the application is worded, although someone applying should give us some information about what is this all going to cost, to include the fact that I'm sure staff will give whichever board is evaluating it, that kind of information as well. So, you know, and some of those things are changing, happy to glad on the work, and some things I just want to make sure that all the different sections sound going on. I don't think we're going to open the floodgates.
No.
Well, with this, the 600 signatures will be both reasonable and to some people daunting. But
Let me toss it to Ms. Dodsworth to respond a bit.
Right. Thank you. Those are great comments and questions. And so we've kind of gone over this several times, so I can kind of clarify some of those things, and then maybe we could see how I wanted to add that. So you talked about some additional whereases. Are you looking at a separate whereas, or if we just said whereas the city council and the community may have occasions to, would that be enough, or do you want two whereases? Would you prefer? Under the first whereas, you had said something about we should be letting the community.
It could be the city council or the community, or it could be two separate whereases. I guess my idea about the whereases is that let's keep all the whereases on the first page. But I'm not, I don't have a real goal as to a number to do, but I would want to recognize that one of the reasons we're doing it is that the community may want this to be considered, not just the council, and we should so
Something.
the right wording could be in one, or it could be two.
I think if it says whereas the city council and community may have occasion to name or rename, then I think that covers that. So that would be easy. Down in section B, you said item C, appropriate to the location and will remain relevant as the city grows. I think that's easy to fix and clarifies that. When you talked about number 6, we easily can add to the park, recreational facility, park, recreation, or other city facilities, streets and spaces, something like that.
Yeah, just expand it
Yeah.
so that it's all encompassing as to what the resolution refers to.
Great. Under section 8, we kind of talk a lot about heritage and culture. So I wasn't sure what more you wanted to see added there. You mentioned it maybe about a whereas, but we do talk about, and these are really all things that the council will consider. It doesn't have to be that all of them are relevant or some of them are relevant, but it just says these are things that are important, and so they should be considered as we're reviewing through. So there are quite a few things regarding places of historic relevance and cultural relevance, social significance. So I kind of I can use the word heritage if you think it's necessary, but is that kind of what you were thinking about, or were you looking for something
Actually,
different?
I wasn't particularly, and I didn't think I mentioned, if I did, I didn't intend to, needing to change paragraph 8 there.
No, I was just saying that you talked about heritage being
Yeah,
important.
I was
and
more
so
thinking of a whereas that spoke to that, the importance of correctly choosing names as impacts heritage and the And given the city's vision is that we're informed by
Consistent
our
with one of our
history
vision
and that.
and goals.
So I was more of a, this thought is good, but that there was, it suggests a whereas to me.
All right. Under D regarding who's going to do what. So the intention is that the application is given to the city clerk to file and make sure that it's complete. And then the city manager would be the person to designate who is going to do the review. Right now, the council has agreed, and I think this was many moons ago, to have Park and Recreation Advisory Board review the application, regardless if it's a street or an open space or a park, and that the city manager would designate that. If for some reason somebody else was more appropriate or something, he could designate another person to do it, but he would be the person designating staff to do the work. So that's kind of why that was listed in the process.
Yeah, I just don't think that if you were to put city manager in front of each of those 5 clauses, that you would get a sentence that means what we mean. In other words, each one of those could have a subject as to who's going to do that. In other words, or the subject could be that that the city will advertise. Or 2 might be the city manager refers to it. 3 sort of seems like the committee to whom it's referred would. I mean, these are not all things the city manager would do. It looks like he would do 2
City
and maybe
manager,
5
Why don't we just change it to say the following steps will be used as guidelines for city council approval, : because all those things are done by staff anyway.
are you talking about for section D?
E is an echo.
Oh, E, now
And
we're on
just
E.
change the first 2 sentences and say the following steps will be used as guidelines for city council approval of the application, or whatever you want to say, : and then we need to clean up 1 through 5 because we got periods, we got semicolons. So it should be advertise the intent to name a park facility or consider proposed name, semicolon, refer, blah, 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 semicolon, and then the last one would be and notify the applicant of the application status once the city council has taken action.
Okay. And then regarding public comment, we were informed by the city clerk that implied a public hearing. So if you wanted to say public hearing, we can change that. But we specifically were asking about that. Is it just public comment at a park board? She said specifically it was a public hearing because it was related to this, but however you want to.
Well, I mean, we use public comment in a number of ways. Okay? If we specifically want a public hearing, then we should say that we want a public hearing. You can have public comment by, holding a community meeting at the location of a facility. There's a lot of ways to get public comment, but a public hearing is a more specific process. And in best, it would be likely to have some of both. I think, if you put it out there in the public that we're considering this, that'll generate some public comment. But you would also, if you want to create a record, then you need a public hearing. It seemed that there was elsewhere in the discussion that there was some desire to have a record of the process and that going on, or where people can come to do that.
So Mr. Anderson may have some feedback from his rep on Parks and Rec board.
I'd like to stay away from the requirement of a public hearing and leave it as broad as possible. Solicit public input.
Sounds good. And then just the last thing regarding the comment you made about the section on the application, which was about what assets or resources will be provided. It does talk, and one of the things that came out is that if you were going to change a street name, or if you're going to change a park name, or something along that line, there are costs associated, whether it's signs or people's changing it, letterhead and things like that. And so one of the things two things. One is the park board wanted to have that be an item that was researched, just to lay out some of those potential costs. But also some groups are coming forward saying, we'll buy the sign, we'll put a statue, we'll put some art, or something like that. And so we just wanted that to be upfront, that first of all, let people know there are costs associated with name changes. And also, what do you bring into the table? It's not a requirement, but it's just a question to ask, because it does help complete the application as we're doing. Because for us to do a report to the board that says, here's all the things that it could cost. And then the people that submitted the application said, oh, well, I never thought about that. Well, we still don't have anything to give, or, oh gosh, we would be happy to do a fundraiser, or our board or organization, or as an individual, we want to give this much money towards it. It's just getting a more complete report together to go to the board instead of going back and forth.
Well, I don't disagree with that, and certainly someone who's applying and wants to indicate how they would be supportive of implementing the change is fine. It's just that if you look at the wording almost implies that it's required that you provide something in terms of resources. That was my impression upon reading it, because you've got to answer the question. So the question is, what are you going to provide? It's not what would be required. And then in answering that, if you had there's something required that you would provide, you could say that. It's the nuances to how the question is asked that the person's struggling to answer it, where maybe it implies a requirement that isn't really there.
My favorite as a lawyer drafting is what, if anything, will be provided to. It's the draft of the application. And I can see having a lineal park out here. Somebody say, we want it to be Town Center Park by ABC Real Estate Equity Trust. And we'll give it to you, but we have to have our name on the sign that we will pay for. And the same as the county did with Harry Todd, we'd probably say yes.
Anything else? Do you have sufficient info? Or need more
Unless there's other
clarity?
feedback. I just looked at the last sentence in that same sentence and wrote, how will the name change? Or pardon me, how will the name contribute to the commercialization of the site? Would that be okay? As opposed to add to the commercialization? Because it's right in the code. So we were just referring the application back to the code. So the question could say, instead of how will the name add to, how will the name change contribute to the commercialization?
Something, impact is a good word.
We won't be lucky enough to have Quest Field necessarily in Lakewood, but one never knows.
You never know.
Yeah, never say never.
If there's any other feedback, and then we'll just bring it back to you for
Got it, for approval.
approval.
But we'll get an application for the Whitcomb Signal Control Building.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Never know.
Okay, the only other interesting thing that came up. Oh, it's from, there you are. I didn't see your little light.
Was it flash again? Sorry. I am curious about the criteria, which is item B, numbers 1 through 6. And I don't know that we can actually define them in the legal term, but I'm wondering, because we do provide an example of what I think the criminal activity a negative image, the morals clause, negative image means AKA if there was criminal activity. Is there a way to provide some examples of what is in the best interest of the city? What is worthy? What would provide a strong positive image? And then the one I'm really interested in, and from a different angle than the conversation we've been having, is undue commercialization. Because frankly, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I didn't know if there was a glossary of terms or if the board had thought about that.
It was a modification from the soon after city code. So, or incorporation. So I think those criteria were just carried forward because they were written at the time. Council approved that and they approved the resolution. However, when we were looking at the application as well as doing the staff report, we really talked about what's in the best interest of the city and provides a worthy and enduring legacy. Really now we were tying it back to the council strategic plan and your goals and vision, because that's really your policy document or the document that you use. So maybe that's a whereas that it comes in, or maybe those terms mission of the city is reflects the significance of the future and mission and vision of the city. We were kind of, how do you find that? We looked at the council goals and so I think to clarify that a little bit right there, because again, that's how you would describe it. I don't even know if the city had when it's in other in the corporation, it certainly might be a little different now. It's certainly continued throughout 2030. So, so we could include that in there just to provide some clarification. The documentary you talked about.
Mhm.
We can do it as a whereas, or we can add it to. It's following one criteria, and I think the criteria is really the mission and vision of the council at the time.
Mr. Mayor, I've gotten feedback from one of the viewers that they're not able to hear everyone when they speak. So if you could make sure your microphones are on and you speak into them, that would help.
Thank you very much for that.
One of the reasons I bring this up is that the original information on the website, which is included here, said, well, go read the resolution and then provide the information. And the information in the resolution isn't exactly the same as it is in the application. And some of the wording is different. So I wanted to make sure that we're clear on what we're asking the applicants to provide. And then that's very helpful for the Parks Board as they're evaluating the applications so that they know what criteria they're evaluating against.
What's on the website is the current resolution and the old application packet. So this is an updated one, and the questions on the application really refer right back to the current resolution or the updated resolution. So we would be updating those materials on the website, and anybody interested would get a full packet. We would give them a packet with an outline. This is the packet. Would have a list of who to call. It would have, here are the items to consider. Here is the resolution. Read the resolution, because if you read the resolution, they'll have a bigger idea of what the process is. And then we have the application, and then we have the specific process and timeframe. So I think the materials on the website are the current ones, not the updated ones, because council hasn't approved those yet. But I do have a question for you. You had made a note, and when we started this conversation, you were actually our liaison. So you've been a part of all of these as well. So thank you for your feedback. When you talked about the undue commercialization, what are you looking for, or what can we get for you to help make that more clear? Is there something, a direction you'd like to give us, or thoughts that would help us?
So when I read avoid undue commercialization, I hear don't name it after a company that's paying you money. don't name it Quest Field, because to me, that's commercialization. But is that undue commercialization? So what are we forbidding? What's the limit? What's too much commercialization? I don't know how to answer that question. Avoid undue commercialization.
Maybe we could get some definitions or clarification. We could do some more research. That would be fine. And maybe looking at, business, corporate business versus, we have nonprofits, we have Kiwanis Park, we have Rotary Pavilion, we have things like that. So.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with undue. I'd hate to see flashing lights that say, buy widgets or, Sumner Bonnie Lake School District named their stadium after Sunset Chevrolet, and it helped them refurbish the
The whole thing.
So it can be a valuable tool. And it's pretty subtle.
I am not against, I'm not against corporate sponsorship, trust me. I think it's unclear in how it's written. It doesn't show that we're open to corporate sponsorship.
Okay.
I was also curious. I have got some Scrivener's things and some things that order. It's very, I find this hard to read and understand and to know what it is that the council wants and how I as an applicant should fill it out. So I can give those to you offline.
Yeah, some of the string criteria is either a semicolon and at the end, or, where they're independent as opposed to inclusive. So. Ms. Moss, Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure that I heard correctly that you were going to add street in this process as well.
Yes, under 6, besides the undue commercialization, we'll figure that piece out too. We'll say park, recreational facilities, park, recreation, city facilities, street or spaces or something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. And in the first whereas, it does say city parks and or other city facilities. We could put a little bit more there too to define what that means.
Park, streets, and or other facilities, right? I mean, there was a recent thing that came up with University Place. The folks called me and wanted to engage us in a naming opportunity for the bridge that we broke ground on and did the ribbon cutting for. It's not technically a City of Lakewood facility. We were a participant, but they're reaching out to us and just plant that seed because it doesn't really comply or go with this process.
Yeah.
But they would like to discuss, and they're opening the door to having input from us for the renaming of the
And I
bridge.
think it's technically Pierce County's bridge because
Oh,
it's
is
on
it?
their land. So
Got
I
it.
think it'd be nice for everybody to participate, but I think it's Pierce County's ultimate decision.
It may also be governed by the joint agreement between the three
Oh, boy.
governments.
Okay.
We can take a look at that.
Yeah,
So-
something not for tonight, but I just
Easy-
I'd plant
an
the
easy
seed.
one to punt on.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah, bridge number 1.
That was
Bridge
one of
to
the items
somewhere.
I was going to bring up, is that being consistent, defining city facility, defining that at the beginning. For example, in number 10, under renaming, it does say the most comprehensive list is there, current names of parks, facilities, natural areas, etc. So defining that at the beginning and then
Mhm.
picking that one thing that you're going to say throughout on second references,
Yeah, like
city
city
parks and other
facilities.
city facilities.
Yeah.
It's what I see the most often, city parks and other city
Mhm.
facilities, but at some point it should define in a comprehensive manner, as much
At the
as
beginning.
comprehensive as you can be today, what you're talking about.
No, that's a good point. Up in section 1, we should define the term. Say city facilities or whatever, and parenthetical. Good point. Anything else on this force before we beat it? Dead? Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much for your work on that. Okay, next, we turn to a review of the 2021 Transportation Benefit District Annual Report. And for this, we have our Deputy City Manager, Todd Kraus.
Okay, it's been a long time, so I'm hoping that I have my mic on.
It's interesting because some of us have to turn mics off for others to have them on, so I'll make sure mine's off.
Okay, so this is the good evening, Mayor and council members. This is the 2021 Transportation Benefit District Report, which we're required to present and adopt, or for the City Council to adopt. So we really just have one project that has any TBD funding, and that is your JBLM North project. In 2021, we had estimated $835,000 coming into the Vehicle Licensing Transportation Benefit District Fund. We ended up with $894,000, and that includes the interest. And we had no transfers out in 2021 because recall that we had the decision pending if we could still have a vehicle benefit, transportation benefit district. So we held off on that, and we discussed that back in October 2021, what we would do with those monies that came in 21 and 2022. So this is an update for the JBLM North project, and you'll see further in the budget adjustment where we'll be adding funds to the JBLM project. But in 2020, we had an ending fund balance in the project of $210,000. In 2021, we had some general obligation bonds, some developer contributions, grants, and a reduction of real estate excise tax and swim funds. So leaving a balance of $2.1 million in 2021. And the last two pages, Public Works provided a picture of Gravelly Lake and Veterans Drive before and after. And that concludes my presentation.
I'm glad we're not renaming any facility in this particular document. Are there any questions, Ms. Kraus, on this particular matter? I was going to ask you something fun on page 16. The looks like a new city flagpole that remains at the roundabout there at Veterans and Gravelly. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chart. I guess under expenditures, where is debt service going to show up, or was there just no debt service in 2021?
So how the debt service works is the proceeds will come into the project and the debt service will be paid out of the debt service fund, but funded by the Transportation Benefit District. So debt service payments will never show up in the capital projects funds, just by pure accounting standards.
So in future reports, we're going to see revenues that come into the district.
Yes,
And so, but they're going to go out not to debt service, but just be transferred to another fund?
it'll be transferred to a debt service fund to make the debt service payment. So all of our debt service payments are made out of the debt service payments or debt service accounts.
Okay, so whereas in this report, it says transfers to the transportation CIP, future reports, when there is going to be debt service, will say transfer to the debt service fund.
Yes, that is correct.
And do you anticipate, given the history of ever increasing revenue, do you ever envision to the point of where annual revenues will exceed what's going to be needed for debt service within the next 5 years?
It is possible, just given what we've seen, our transportation benefit district revenues have been more than the $835,000 in recent years.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Kraus on this particular item? So all the money from the carryover of 2020 and 2021 are going to the JBLM North project, right?
Yeah, from what was allocated by the city council at that time.
Got
You'll
it.
see in the carry forward budget adjustments that I'll be implementing what the city council approved in December of 2021 in regards to the transportation benefit funds that are sitting in the ending fund balance. And I'll cover that as part of the carry forward.
Great. With no other questions on that particular item, we'll go ahead and move into the 2021 year-end financial report. Again, with Ms. Kraus.
Okay, so this is the year-end financial report, and I just want to call out that this is about a 125-page document. I'm not going to go through each of the pages. I have a
Well, why not?
one-page summary. But the bottom line is, it's good news. The city is in a good financial position. We have higher than anticipated revenue collections in 2020 and 2021. And that is due to the action strategies that were put in place to address the impact or the potential impact of the pandemic in 2020. And it's resulted in one-time monies that are available for capital projects and infrastructure programs, other one-time investment opportunities, including the creation of the Economic Development Opportunity Program that the City Council approved last year. And another key attribute to the city's success is the City Council's adopted financial policies that provide a vital framework for governance and decision-making, especially in regards to the issues that substantively impact the city's finances, such as the current economic uncertainty. So these policies have served us very well, and that's what you're seeing here is the result of that. So this is on page 19. I'm just going to focus primarily on the general and street fund. Operating revenues of 46.3 million exceeded operating expenditures of 38.2 million by 8.1 million. This resulted in ending fund balance at 12/31 of 2021 of $17.8 million. And that includes a 2% contingency reserves of 926,000, 5% general fund reserves of 2.3 million, 5% strategic reserves of 2.3 million, and the first million of the 2 million that is set aside for economic development opportunities. So we set aside 1 million in the general fund in 2021. In 2022, you'll see in the carry forward that we've set aside another million for a total of $2 million. So this results in an undesignated reserve for 2022 through 2024 budgets of 11.2 million. So this is before the carry forward. If the city council were to approve the carry forward as presented, which you have the opportunity to modify, this ending fund balance is reduced to 6.7 million with the proposed carry forward. Some of the big items that increased over 2022 is sales taxes up by 2.5 million. And along with that is criminal justice sales tax and the park sales tax. Those combined increased by 340,000. Gambling tax came in at 1.9 million above 2020. And camera enforcement fines with the opening of the schools is up by 419,000. A couple new pieces that we've added to the document is the sales tax by sector. And you'll see that in your city manager's report. I believe it was from last week where we have a comparison of 2017 through 2021, the sales tax by sector, which shows what the increase is over the prior year in terms of dollars and percentage, as well as that sector's percentage of the overall sales tax revenue for each year. The other piece of information we've added is the city tree fund. The fund started coming in 2009, and through December 2021, we received a total of 118,240. But we've also spent $61,744. So at the end of 12/31/2021, there is a balance of 56,496. So we'll continue to show this on the quarterly report just to be transparent, and you can see what transactions came in and what went out. The other two items I wanted to highlight is on page 56, cost recovery for development services. The policy is set at 85%, and 2021, we came in at 85%. Cost recovery for parks and recreation, the policy is set at 45%, and actuals came in at 46%. And that concludes my presentation.
So take my simpleton mind back to kind of the overall page on the ending fund balance.
And that would be on page 19 of your
Right.
packet.
Yep.
And at the very bottom is where you will see that the ending fund balance as a percentage of operating revenues is 38.4%. Our target for 12% to meet the 2% contingency reserves, the 5% for general
Mhm.
fund reserves, and the 5% for strategic reserves totals $5,560,000. Then you'll see the set aside for the Economic Development Opportunity Fund of $1 million, leaving the undesignated reserve for 2022 and 2024 budgets of 11.2 million. So just keep in mind that those are for one-time programs and not to be used for
Right.
operating revenues.
But it's a significant opportunity to look at opportunities for capital investment where there may be needs, right?
Yes, that is the good news. We have all that money to do some special projects.
Mr. Boki.
That you mentioned when the adjustments that you're asking for in the next,
In the next presentation, it'll be reduced to $6.7 million. Still a substantial amount.
In the
of
next
money.
presentation tonight? or-
Yes, that's the next presentation.
which by your estimate would leave us with what?
6.7 million in the general fund.
Yeah, how much would that be percentage wise?
I will have that in my next presentation.
Getting ahead of ourselves?
Yeah, don't get ahead of progress, Mr. Boki. Yeah, exactly. She leaves us with anticipation for the next event.
Did you have other questions on this quarterly report?
Well, let me
or
just
do I-
ask, any other, Mr. Brandstetter?
Fund and a felony seizure fund. When we just recently took action regarding a piece of property that was seized, to declare it excess to be able to go and do that, which I think was going to go into the narcotic seizure fund to be able to go and do that. But when in your records, does that get evaluated in terms of dollars and showing up on the books? It doesn't look like it's in this year. Doesn't look at the, unless the property is relatively worthless, but how does that work when you see something that's tangible rather than monetary?
So like if they're gonna seize a home, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, we had apparently a piece of property that is actually physically in Puyallup that we just declared as excess surplus, I guess was the word, surplus to the city. But we're the owner of it right now, so I'm trying to decide,
Okay.
when do we show it on our books as revenue?
So we'll show it on our books as revenue when it actually turns over to the city. So if it's sitting to be determined whether it goes to the city, it won't show up on our books until we actually get the money.
Okay, so I guess in order for the council to declare as surplus.
You know, I am gonna have to get additional detail on the background of it. I'm not familiar with that piece of property that you're referring to. Can I get back to council on that?
Yeah,
please?
I'm just more using it as an example of
Sure.
we didn't seize money, we seized something, and when does it get showed up on these books as dollars?
And Councilmember Ransdell, that's on the legal department. We brought that forward. We are in the position of being responsible to report that to finance. And that will happen probably tomorrow, since I have not done that. I need to report it to finance. She can't record what she doesn't know about.
Okay,
So,
but it's a 2022 item, not a 2021
Okay.
item. So, okay, thank you.
Couple of comments. Thank you for putting the tree information in there so that we can now follow that. Because it's, there is some importance to that. And I'm kind of wondering, and maybe we should get a separate ARPA report some of these items look like they haven't been spent this year. I was looking on, I can't remember what page here. That, we put that money out in progress, so 4.1 million, but as of December, 1.3 had been spent. How are we doing? And $1 million of that was the hotel. So a number of these other recipients, including some internal recipients, internal to the city, haven't taken any money. For instance, West Pierce,
Okay.
241,000, nothing. So do they need it?
Well, so remember that the city council approved the ARPA programs in ordinance 759, and then the city council approved the budgets in ordinance number 761. That occurred in December. So it was paused until the city council approved it.
Okay.
You'll see in the next quarter report, there'll be more activity and we can add additional information for that. But there wasn't a whole lot to report in 2021 just because
Okay.
when the city council's action.
Oh, we
took
didn't do it
place.
till late in the year then.
Yes.
Okay, I was wondering, it seems like we've been talking about some of
Yeah,
this
it's
stuff for a
actually, I
while. And I'm
apologize,
like,
it was more like November 15th, because you approved the
Okay.
mid-biennium budget adjustment, and then right after that, you approved on that same day, the ARPA fund ordinance.
okay,
So not a whole lot of activity in the last quarter, but for the next quarter, you'll see more activity.
okay. Thank you. That's all.
Well, thank you for the year-end financial report. Now we can jump to the carry forward budget adjustment for 2022.
Okay, so the proposed carry forward budget adjustment. So the purpose of this is to revise our 2022 beginning balance to reflect the 2021 ending fund balance. And the fund that is most impacted is the general fund. It also includes items that city council previously approved. We're appropriating projects that are funded by grants and contributions, so no impact to the general fund. We have continuation of capital projects and some new allocations. Our next step is the public hearing on May 2nd, and then followed by adoption on May 16th. And again, this is the proposed, city council can modify as necessary. The packets include the current state of the economy and a budget adjustment approach. And details of each of the proposed budget adjustments is written out in the narrative. There's also a summary of the list of the proposed budget adjustments that show the type of adjustment, whether it's the grant or continuation of projects new, and if it's one-time or ongoing. There's a proposed revised budget ordinance on page 202, if the city council were to approve the budget as proposed, and then the fund summaries, which shows the impact of the budget adjustment to each of the funds. And I will go straight to answer the question on what our ending fund balance is as a percentage of operating revenues. So if you look at page 206 of your packet, you'll see the ending fund balance for the general fund. So our target reserves, if we're looking at 2%, contingency reserves would be 868,000. Our 5% general fund reserves is 2,170,000. Same with the strategic reserves. We're setting aside the $2 million that the city council approved for the Economic Opportunity Fund, leaving the undesignated 2022 through 2024 funds of $6,682,000. So that's what we end up with if we were to go through all of these budget adjustments and the city council approved them.
Mr. Anderson.
Are all our labor contracts settled?
Our labor contracts are, yes, they are caught up for 2022. And I have
What about
that.
2023?
2023, we have the ASME, and actually I added a page. We have the ASME, which goes through 2023. Teamsters goes through the 2025. The lieutenants and the police guild go through 2022. So any impacts after 22 are not considered in this adjustment. They'll be considered for the 2023.
And what does 1% on the badges contracts cost us?
Oh, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Let's see. If their budget is about, oh, yeah, I don't really have it broken out by the different groups in this document. I had it previously, but can I get back on that piece?
Sure. Because they're getting more expensive.
Everything is more expensive.
Mhm.
And is there a place, I failed to find it if it is here, where the one-time federal and state monies, the extra CDBG money, the ARPA money is
Yes.
broken out,
Yes,
just
there is.
standalone?
Yeah, so I just highlighted the packet contents. So some of the highlights are for the general fund.
On page.
It's just a highlight. There's
Okay.
it's like a 70-page document. So I'm just doing a one-page cover and then I can go through the details. But if you recall.
Where's
as-
the one-page cover? Can you?
Well, it's really not a one page that covers everything unless you look, well, let's actually,
Starting on page 190.
yes, yes, let's go to page 193.
Okay.
193 is the summary of your proposed budget our
Okay.
proposed budget adjustments. And you'll see that in the, so I'm going to switch back to my notes,
Mhm.
okay? So this includes restoring in the general fund replacement reserves. So that replacement reserves for 2021 and 22 was about almost $1.7 million. And we dropped that off during the adopted budget. We restored 2021 reserves for fleet and equipment. We're asking to restore it for 2022 as well. It
Okay,
also, yeah.
I guess it's not, it didn't express myself clearly. I want to know if there's somewhere we can just look at just the ARPA money.
Oh, sure.
Mm.
Yeah, if you want to look at just
Or
the ARPA
just the
money.
one-time funds that come in for CDBG, because we're going to
Okay.
have all this great cash reserve, but
Okay,
they're in restricted categories that are one-time.
yes.
And
so
we have
that's-
restricted categories like stormwater.
Yeah.
That we may have access in, but they aren't one-time. So,
Yes,
I'd like to see the one-time money
Sure.
broken out.
okay. So what I was going to do is show you the one-time monies that's in the general fund and then move on. And I have listed the ARPA programs as well. But if you want to start with the ARPA programs, that is on page 165. And if you recall, this is my summary table. If you recall in ordinance 759, which was adopted last year, late last year, I believe it was November 15th. So on page 165, ordinance 759 included $4,192,719 that the city council approved. By motion, now this is like I'll call it the round two or so, that the city council approved by motion, and I listed each of the motions on the following pages. That totals $3,029,481. So the total allocations for ARPA with this budget adjustment is $7,222,200. So you've just allocated just a little bit more than the total that the city would be getting, 13.67 million or so. So the categories as shown here, if the city council were to adopt the programs as such, as of now, until any changes in the final ruling, if the categories change, we have category 1 of public health. You have HR temporary staffing for COVID tracing of 30,360. We have the Comfort Inn of $1,050,000. Category 3 for services to disproportionately impacted communities is $1,336,768. Revenue replacement is $4,116,760. And then the indirect administration cost of $688,312. That is the current breakout. Following that is the carry forward of the projects. So these are projects that the city council already approved and we're carrying over the funds to continue because remember, we have until 2026 to spend these funds. And the way that we budget it is if the city council approved the program, we put it all into the year that the city council approved it, and then we'll just continue carrying it over. Starting on page starting on page 168 is the new allocations. And this is what the city council discussed back in December of 2021. But there wasn't time to capture it in the budget adjustment with the required public hearings and all for budget adjustment purposes. So new allocations, starting with motion 2021-102 is the Tacoma Pro Bono. And then it'll follow each of your motions that you took, that you approved in December of 2021. Is there a specific one that you want me to cover or just a list?
No, I'd just like to see it broken out so that we get a better picture of what's ongoing and what's one
Sure.
time.
Okay, so on page, so because ARPA funds are considered one time, everything is going to be listed as one time. On page 197, you'll see a summary starting kind of towards the first blue highlight is the total fund 196 ARPA. You'll see that the carry forward from what you approved in ordinance 759. And then towards the bottom, you'll see the new grant awards as approved by the city council on December 20th, 2021 via separate motions. And you'll see that the Tacoma Pro Bono, the Boys and Girls Teen Club, YMCA Child and Teen Care Services, Municipal Court Technology Improvements, City Hall HVAC air handlers and bipolar ionization on the next page, 198. You'll see the hand washing stations at city parks without restrooms, the City Hall reconfiguration study, the Lakewood Police Department retention bonus, and the temporary human resources personnel for COVID tracking. Is that helpful, or is there a different way to present it for the next round? Okay. And then you also were interested in CDBG?
Just the same kind of categorization, because
Okay.
CDBG came in 2 batches in the last couple of years. The
So,
regular CDBG and the CDBG CV. And
yes,
some
that
other
is
thing.
also itemized. And for the summary page, that is on page 196, you'll see carry forward of 2021 funds broken out by the different programs. So for example, CDBG carry forward of fiscal year 2021 funds, you'll have housing programs for major housing programs administration, administration of home, public service, physical improvements, and housing emergency assistance displacement. Then there is the funding recommendations for affordable housing, LAHSA, Affordable Housing Administration. Then there are balances from the city of Tacoma, and that is broken out by the different years as well. Then we have 2020 housing programs, 2020 major home and sewer. We have the CDBG CARES round 2 and round 3 balances. And then there's restricted ending fund balance for future loan programs.
Mr. Branstetter?
Okay, I just have a question, and I'm on page 176. And I'm looking at item 301-0043, the H-Bard complex restoration and renovation. And I want to make sure that I'm reading this right, because there's all sorts of talks about millions of dollars in that paragraph, but that the carry forward budget adjustment is only budgeting $150.
150,000, yes,
100,
yes.
yeah, decimal points are that 100, so despite all of the talks about millions, we're really only putting forward 150,000 until we figure out whether we want to do the millions.
Yes, the city council agreed when we presented this that we would provide 150,000 in seed money. And that's what this 150,000 is for. The rest of it is just informational.
I would just say that the paragraph reads like it's already decided.
For the next
That the
one,
150 is just the first part of something that's already the plan. That was, and the 150 is to do a study to figure out, is there a viable plan?
I can separate it and put background.
Well, I'm just saying, as long as it's only 150,000 this go around, I'm fine.
Are there any other questions before I jump back to the general fund, just to highlight some of the new programs? Or do you want to go through that?
Just a quick question on some of the provisions on 194 of the packet here. So this is the summary of all the various requests, right?
Yes.
We haven't chatted a ton about it, but I'm looking at the transfer to park CIP on the Colonial Plaza light up, the lighting in the Gary Oaks, and there's a figure of 15 grand in there. I'm not sure that's going to be enough to do it right in that area where we want to do some park work.
Okay. So the original figure that came in was $10,000, and then we worked with the department and they provided the 15,000 as a better estimate.
And what does that include though? Is it just lighting, electrical? What are they doing? Because we
I will tell
talked to
you.
the
it's-
manager a little bit more about enhancing that as a more of a park area,
Sure,
at least within the right of way that we own.
sure. Let me just get to that page. So that is that's adding $15,000. And the information that I received is this is for the city's downtown sub-area plan,
Mhm.
identifies improvements to road corridors for vehicle and pedestrian functioning and safety, general streetscape improvements such as street lighting, landscaping, and signage contribute to increased use and the overall public experience. These funds will be used to design, install, and add uplighting and landscaping improvements near the Gary Oak trees adjacent to the new public art installation and Colonial Plaza Festival street improvements on Motor Avenue.
Sounds like the right description. Has Ms. Dodsworth looked at that in terms of
Yes,
from
actually,
the
I
Parks Department
I
standpoint?
did receive that from Mary Dodsworth and Scott Williams.
Better look right, is all I'm saying. 15 grand.
And our Parks Director, Mary Dodsworth, is watching this presentation from her
Good,
desk.
good.
So,
I was thinking it would be at least twice that to do the proper berming and bouldering and make it look appropriate for a little city pocket park. So we'll take a look at it. Did you have something, Ms. Farmer?
I was curious, Mr. Mayor, where your vision extended to, because I drove by that today and the park benches that I believe the property owner has placed there are already in a state of a little bit of disrepair and vandalism and they don't necessarily match the type of benches that we have at city parks. And so if you're saying pocket park, I'm thinking, yeah, we might need a little bit more.
I noted that. Shall I go back to general fund? Okay. So in the general fund, I would just like to highlight that this includes transfers to transportation CIP for 4 projects that will benefit from the initial design work for the grants that we're seeking. And that is on page 177 of your council packet, which you have seen. You have seen them before, but if you want me to cover those, I'm happy to cover it. But it totals $305,000. It is for Custer Road, Bridgeport Way to 75th Street of $65,000. Custer Road Sidewalk, Steilacoom Boulevard to just west of Bridgeport for $75,000. 100th Street Southwest Lakeview Drive to South Tacoma Way, inclusive of 40th and that's 100,000. And then Union Avenue, Berkeley Street to Thorn Lane of $65,000. It also includes some new programs, and for the new programs that are one-time funded is we have transfers to transportation CIP totaling 786,860. That includes the 305,000 that I just mentioned. We have 500,000 for the Carwan Village abatement. We have transfers to Park CIP of 290,000, 60,000 of which 30,000 will be reimbursed by the library for the future library feasibility study. We've added an associate planner, a limited term position that is set to expire at the end of 2023. We have a non-motorized plan, additional funds of 57,200 on top of the 20,000 or so that we're carrying over for continuation of project. There is $49,870 request for the comp plan amendment as it relates to housing element. We have recreation program sponsored events, but this is offset by revenues coming in. We have a street end study, additional funding needed of 30,000 on top of the current 20,000. We have the police station fuel system modernization for 30,000. There is an additional 24,000 that is needed for the basic law enforcement academy. Contribution to SHAPE, the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, of 20,000. We have the purchase of two new copiers at just under 20,000. This is on your summary page, and I'm only pulling out page 193, and I'm only pulling out the one-time programs and highlighting that. We have additional cost to outfit a vehicle of 17,250. We have graffiti removal equipment and initial supplies. This is a request that we had of WCIA, but we didn't receive the funding for that. But it's been identified as an important program. On an ongoing basis, I mentioned that we're restoring the replacement reserves. We're implementing the AFSCME collective bargaining agreement, the conversion to PERS effective July 1st, the WCIA assessment increase of 107,000 to the general fund, and then the PALS and PALS SED Plus Amazon Web Services for permitting system is an additional 48,000. That's going to the City Council on May 2nd, the interlocal agreement, and it speaks to that. We have the primary public defender contract increase of $36,000. We're also converting 2 maintenance assistants positions that'll increase to 0.5 FTE, and then we're converting one of our maintenance workers from a 0.5 to 1 full-time position, but the budgetary impact is 0 because we're reducing temporary help services. We are incorporating the Teamsters collective bargaining agreement in here, just under 10,000. We have an additional request of just over 6,000 for smartphones and the plan cost. The spring cleanup mailing was 2,300, and then just the Industrial Park, Woodbrook Industrial Park Association membership dues of 1,260 related to the tactical tailor. So overall, our new programs total 3,692,000 with offset of 73,000 in revenues coming in. So I wanted to highlight those because they impact the general fund. And as I mentioned in the TBD annual report, we had identified in October and December 2021 the financing options to the City Council for the TBD funded projects. We had earmarked then 1,718,000 of TBD funds to go to these transportation projects. So rather than having them sit in ending fund balance in the Transportation Benefit District, I propose that we transfer these so that we're not double dipping potentially if we see ending fund balance in these funds. So these are going to the Ardmore Whitman 93rd Street project for 2022 design. We have the Ardmore Whitman 93rd Street 2023 construction, and then also the Hipkins Road Southwest for 2022 design. In addition to the monies that we earmarked from the Transportation Benefit District, we also earmarked $2,690,000 from real estate excise tax. And those are going again to the Armour Whitman and 93rd Street for 2023 construction, and then Hipkins Road for construction. You received an update from the city manager I think it was, I don't know, a month or so ago. And speaking of the JBLM project and some of the shortfalls and the reason for the shortfalls, we've identified at that time, coming from real estate excise tax, $1.7 million just from excess that we collected in available balances in 2021. And then we increased the estimates just slightly in 2022 as well. So those are also included in your budget adjustment. And those are the key things from key items affecting the general fund. And that concludes my presentation.
Again, just to clarify, the North owned property purchase of the tactical tailor, the city is loaning SSMCP $506,282. What are the terms of that? And
So the source of funds for the repayment of the interfund loan was used to pay, at that time, we had a certain amount. We thought it was going to be about $553,000. It actually came in a little bit higher because there were some outstanding invoices that we were not aware of. But the terms of that is the lease revenue from Tactical Tailor is about $216,000, if I remember off the top of my head. So that will be used to pay off the loan. And right now they're thinking like 2.5 years. So those monies will first be applied to pay off the interfund loan.
so when Tactical Tailor pays on their lease, that money will go into Fund 192?
Yes. So we have an accounting structure set up so that we can account for the lease revenues coming in and the interfund loan payments going out.
So to the extent that or however many years it takes them to actually move, that's going to be revenue to the South Sound Military Communities Partnership. Did SSMCP become the owner of that property when we acquired it, or did the city?
SSMCP is not a legal entity. The city is the fiscal agent and the party to the agreement with the federal government.
Okay, so the lease revenue, though, is it like coming to us and we're transferring it to SSMCP, or is that our?
It's coming to us and we're transferring it to us. And we had to get permission from AMC down in San Antonio to jump through that hoop. They didn't want to let the
Okay,
lease revenue be
the
applied.
other thing that confused me is that it looks like it's going into that one fund that is
SSMCP has a fund here, but doesn't, but that's
They don't have access to the money unless we give it to them.
right. It's a city pocket that's a designated fund under a cooperative agreement with other jurisdictions.
It goes for public hearing on May 2nd. Is there anything that the city council would like additional information on or clarification before that public hearing?
And Don't worry about the cost of 1% on the police. I figured it out.
I'm not quite sure how to phrase this. I was just looking at the communications portion. I think it was, I'm not quite sure where it is. There's so many pages. But increasing maybe some communication support. I think that there's an intern coming, but we've been doing so well. And it's stuff I know that we've been talking about a lot of trying to get more support for communications. And so that is something that I would like considered.
And we actually have funding for communications intern. We had one intern that's been working, and then we're bringing on a second intern who is going to help more with the webpage.
I was thinking more than an intern. I was saying an intern is probably not sufficient. So that was my ask,
Yes, page 140. Okay. Yes, City Council did approve 35,000 for a strategic communications plan, and that wasn't spent, so we're carrying that over. And so Mr. Kupriba does have additional resources to help out in that area.
I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase it. I know personally as a one-person shop, it's very difficult to find time to do strategic planning when you're doing all the things. And so I would highly advocate for additional staff. I know that we have the 35,000 for the strategic plan. There's a tiny amount for web services, a website upgrade, I believe 5,000-ish. Which is on a different page. It would be, I don't know if it's possible to have the communication items grouped together, even though they do, one is IT and one belongs in a different section, but I don't know if it's possible to have them together.
I have a question I thought I saw in here somewhere about parks and parks maintenance. And I was under the impression we were hiring an additional person in parks maintenance. But now it says something like we're gonna make 2 half-time people into full-time,
Yeah,
or which would be the equivalent of 1, I guess. Please explain.
Yes, we currently have 2 maintenance assistants positions, and they are both 0.75 FTE. And the proposal in this budget adjustment is actually, they are doing it now, is to increase those 2 maintenance positions to 1 full-time positions each and make them maintenance workers. So get rid of the maintenance assistants, make them maintenance workers. Then we also have a half-time maintenance worker position that we're moving to make it full-time. So that's another half-time position. So that's a total of 1 FTE increase in the maintenance worker positions.
Okay, so when you say maintenance worker, that's somebody who does everything,
Essentially, yeah, we have.
like
the-
fixing things
Yes.
in here and what else?
Yeah, the way that Parks Director Mary Dodsworth has it is she tries to utilize her positions with flexibility. And that was being funded by, within the existing budget so that there's no budgetary impact.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? So just to clarify, going forward, we've got, in terms of one-time monies down the road, we've got about 5 million in ARPA funds
Yes.
that are subject to the process that we went through, and there's multiple asks that we'll consider at some point
Yes, and
in
actually,
the future.
city manager has asked that we get back on that. And so he has asked for city projects to come forward as an ask if we have any. And then Our long-range strategic planning manager, Tiffany Spear, has been keeping track of what the requests are. And at some point, I think you have a meeting that is scheduled in May to continue that discussion.
Right.
So that's when she's planning to bring it back. And I can't remember off the top of my head what day that was. I was thinking that it was in mid-May, mid or end of May.
So it's those resources we've got to address, and then of course, the carryover monies that we just talked about tonight
Yes.
at some point, which is great to have the reserve and rainy day fund, so to speak. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yeah, and I understand that we've got both city projects that to be considered, and then we've got applications externally for ARPA funds. But a week from today, we're going to be here doing some strategic planning of our own regarding what we might want to do regarding homelessness and that to do that. And so that ARPA funds are a resource that we could look to is if we come up with a council initiated initiative that we want to pursue in that. And I think if we could sort of get an idea about what might be available in that regard, that would be helpful to us a week from now.
Any other thoughts or comments on that, Mr. Boki? You're looking pensive.
Excuse me, I am waiting for that ARPA discussion because I think we need to, given the light of recent events, we need to have some discussions about what direction we want to go through remaining, since we've been very generous with the first 7 million.
Mm-hmm.
And internally focused in some cases, so.
Anything else? Well, very good. Well, thank you. There's a lot there, and I understand we'll have a chance after the public hearing to reflect further if need be before we adopt the budget adjustments.
Yes.
Great. So if that is it for the designated items for discussion, we have the items tentatively scheduled for next week, the May 2, 2022 regular city council meeting. You'll see those on your listing. Quite a few items to review and consider for next week. And now we turn to reports by the city manager, Ms. Kraus.
Well, I'm going to start with an update on the Parks Appreciation Day. And our Parks Director, Mary Dosworth, has reported that it was a huge success. And after 2 years left, over 200 people participated on Saturday, April 23rd at sites throughout Lakewood, including Fort Steilacoom Park, American Lake, Wards Lake Park, Springbrook, Kiwanis, and the Community Garden. The projects included restoring historic cemetery markers, removing weeds and pulling scotch broom, placing bark in beds, spreading plate chips, painting over graffiti on bathroom and shelter buildings, and garbage removal. And we're thankful that the community cares so much about the parks. Our Lakewood Parks and Recreation Board members hosted each of the park sites, and many families and neighbors living near the park showed up. Organized groups that participated included Lake City Neighborhood Association, Hutloff Middle School, Church of Latter-day Saints, Tahoma Audubon, the Gary Oaks Conservatory, Troop 2329, Little Church on the Prairie, Young Life, Springbrook Connections, Community Master Gardeners, West Pierce Fire and Rescue, American Lake Improvement Club, and members of many of our service clubs, including the Clover Park Kiwanis, Lakewood Rotary, Clover Park Rotaries, Tacoma Southeast Rotary Club, Lakewood's Lions First Club, the Lakewood Knights Lions, Lakes High School Key Club, Clover Park School District, Superintendent Ron Banner, Pierce County Council Member Janie Hitchens, Mayor Whalen, and the amazing City Council of the City of Lakewood. So that was the positive note. And then I just wanted to go over the upcoming calendar. On May 3rd at 5:30 to 7 p.m., we have the United Way of Pierce County Centennial Campaign Reception, 100 Years and Beyond, the Road to Possibilities at the LeMay America's Car Museum. And May 4th, we have the Greater Lakes Mental Health Care in Lakewood and the Multi-Care Behavioral Health Network are hosting a 2022 Changing Minds virtual program to hear more about the efforts to expand treatment for children and youth, many of whom are experiencing behavioral health crisis. And you have this in your city manager's report for registering for these events. On May 5th at 6 p.m., we have the annual memorial ceremony honoring law enforcement officers killed in the line of duties and those who continue to serve at the Church of All Nations on 112th Street East in Tacoma. May 21st at 11 till 4 p.m., we have the Youth Summit at Harrison Prep, and Mayor Whalen will provide a welcome. On May 21st, between 4 and 8:30 p.m., we have the Saturday Street Festival, Dancing in the Streets. So those are some of your upcoming meetings or events. And that concludes my update.
Well, how brief. We're going to have you sit in for Mr. Caulfield every week.
Give them some notes on it.
Yeah.
Could you send a list of those out?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Of
The events.
events, yeah. Hopefully Brianna will make sure and she will get those out for us, but there's a lot of stuff coming up for sure.
It's easier if it's in one list and you can collate
Sure.
it with your calendar.
That would be great. Any further questions of our acting city manager? Thank you for all your help this week.
Thank
Very helpful. Now we turn, yeah, and the candy, quite good, thank you. We turn to council comments. I'm sure we all have a few. Mr. Branstetter,
Actually, I have none, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Boki.
I'll introduce the topic. I'm sure Mayor Whalen will have more to say. The PCRC meeting on Thursday did not go well for the city of Lakewood, despite being very reasonable in our offer of either taking 80,000 or 86,000.
Is on the population target issue.
The representative from the city of Gig Harbor immediately jumped on that because they're so well known for their love of taking population, and they and everyone else piled on and said, no, the core cities have to take whatever we tell them they're going to have to take. So that leaves us with 88,000, and 86,000 was going to be a reach. So although Councilmember Mello did open the door, and I think we should accept that invitation to ask for capital funding, which I'm sure when the smaller cities hear any asks from any of the core cities for capital funding requests, of course, which would have to be in transportation because that's the only thing that they can guarantee, they won't like. But I believe that, you know, we're going to be at 88,000. So we're going to have to be, I think, really have some serious discussions about how we're going to do that. And off the top of my head, it's things like increased height limitations here in the town center. It would be to look at the future BRT route and find some locations where we can do some high density again with, you know, height, very high. We might even want to do minimum height requirements on some of these areas if they want to put in multifamily housing. I'm even toying with the idea that we should take another look at the Tillicum neighborhood and parts along Union Avenue there for some high density housing. And that maybe our ask should be for them to pay for Union Avenue improvements to bring it up to speed. But that's just my thoughts off the top of my head. If we still want to preserve neighborhoods and whatnot, we're going to have to be smart about it. And I would also note, and they've noted in the meeting, it's you agree to take the amount. They don't tell you how you have to take it. And so, like a lot of cities, I'm sure, you know, they another thing we could think about is to try to pay for all this stuff is to try to is to think about parks impact fee and that would only be on residential properties, of course. To figure that out, but in a way that preserves our neighborhoods. So I'll leave it at that. Had a good time at Parks Appreciation Day, Kiwanis Park. I look forward to further conversations. Thank you.
Ms. Bell,
I am good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Farmer,
I realized that I didn't fully express my appreciation for the work done on the resolution for the naming and renaming of city facilities and other city parks and other city facilities. And so I really wanted to thank Councilmember Anderson and the Parks Board and Director Barry Dodsworth and all who have been engaged in this conversation for quite some time. It's not an easy thing. And so I wanted to say thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Well, I'd like to express my appreciation for the folks who had to endure the Pierce County Regional Council meeting. I understand that Seattle-centric planning has worked its way south. So I get to endure the Puget Sound Regional Council meeting later this week, where the transportation plan is being considered. I'm not being facetious when I say that maybe we should just raise everything to 12 stories in transit-oriented developments and call it a day.
Right.
If that's what you're telling us to do, we want to be high-rise, multifamily with no parking next to transit. We'll draw a box and say, you can do it there. And I'll be long gone before anybody builds anything like that. It's unrealistic, but
They don't seem to care about reality.
yeah. So. Yeah. And you know, if you go up, if you put the West Pierce Fire boom out here and you get up 4 or 5 stories, you got a great mountain range view. And you can see the Olympics on the other side. It's just we've got trees in the way because we're Lakewood.
Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't make it around to all the parks on Saturday, but I was really happy to see the support that we had at Port Silicon Park. Some of the parking lot area that had all those dead bushes from the flowers that were there. They were just having a great old time picking the dead pieces off. And I just walked by and I said, hey, you guys are doing a great job. And they just get this big smile. Thank you. So we had a lot of help. It was more or less the youth that was doing this. So it was a great day.
It was a busy week. I'll start off with a chamber event. I was invited to a ribbon cutting ceremony for Coleman Worldwide Movers. You might ask, who are they and where did they move? They purchased the Oakwood Elementary site, which is about a 10-acre site. And I went over there and it was amazing because they had moved a lot of earth. They put in, I don't know how many, couple $1 million in infrastructure improvements already in anticipation of getting the facility off the ground. They are a company that specializes in residential and commercial moving operations, and they're here in the South Sound because of JBLM principally. And so again, pays tribute to much of the work that we know is important in terms of raising the economic base for contractors to be able to site here to serve our military members and their families. It was an interesting opportunity because not only were there members of the Chamber of Commerce there, and I was pleased to be invited to it, but the head of this company and his wife flew in from Alabama. The other partners and head came down from Anchorage, Alaska. This was a big deal to them because they have 56 sites around the country. This is like number 57. And I said, why Lakewood? And the woman who was the project manager said, we have been looking for years to try to find the right property site. And this one came up and Becky Newton was there. And this woman said, incredibly complimentary things about Lakewood, its staff, its permitting, and how welcoming the city was to work with them. And they also commented how pleased that they were in terms of being able to work with other voices in the city, those who really were challenged by some of the tree issues. And so they showed us they preserved a number of oaks on the site, and they were appreciative of those voices because that helped them want to be a better neighbor and a community player. And so there's some beautiful groves of oaks that were sustained on site. It's going to be a very nice facility, a lot of, I don't know how many multiple millions of dollars will be invested there, but it's a long-term play for them. And they're going to look for another site because they see their opportunities expanding in the South Sound. And they were so pleased with their experience in Lakewood that they might look for another facility site here in Lakewood. So that was a positive thing. Oakwood Elementary. So you have to go down by 83rd-ish. I have to. Yeah, it was. Right. Yeah, it's often there. It's, I've not been there, and it was really amazing to see. And so good for them, good for us. It was a positive day. Then I went to later that evening, not so positive, the PCRC meeting. It was fine. And just to give a little bit of meat to Mr. Boke's background information, as you may recall, we're in this planning exercise by which we are, as core cities, Tacoma is a large metropolitan city, Puyallup, Lakewood, UP to some extent. We're trying to grapple with allocations of population. And so Tiffany Spear did a wonderful job of putting together that letter that I signed on our behalf and sent to PCRC to basically say, we want to be a regional player, but we also want to be realistic. And we articulated some reasons why we thought a target of 80,234 was more reasonable than 88,000, because 52% of our land mass is really not buildable for the various reasons. We got public institutional uses, we've got the air corridor, we got JBLM, we got lakes, all those sorts of things. And bottom line is none of them wanted to hear it. It was, one of those things where, we hear what you have to say. Thank you for your letter. We appreciate the information, but they expect the core cities to take their share. And we were reminded, this is just a planning exercise. I said, well, yes, but it has to be based in some sense of reality. We can't just throw a number on a wall and with a straight face and say we can achieve that if we really can't. And we've done our best job to try to articulate why we think it's a challenge. But be that as it may, we're going to be forced to plan for a higher number, and it's probably going to be the 86 to 88,000, which means we need to do maybe a job of saying, well, gee, the ADU ordinance we have, that could have an impact of X on our planning, as could the cottage housing ordinance. Yes, we can talk about density in the residential zones, and yes, we can talk about another sub-area planning process potentially, but we got to come up with another basically 8,000, 8,000 in population to be filled by residential units somewhere in the city. So anyway, more to follow on that, but it was interesting. Yeah, it's a lot. And the two sub-area plans, as you recall, collectively are a shade over 4,000 units that we created by that 2.5 to 3 year planning process. So we got to double that some way, somehow. So anyway, Parks and Recreation, the Parks Appreciation, it was great. Rotary did a fine job. I was out there at Fort Silicon Park with Deputy Mayor Moss and others, and we planted all sorts of good flowers out there and got the pavilion in ship shape, so it looks pretty good. I received an email today, speaking of opportunities for increased housing, from the CEO of the Lehigh, the Low Income Housing Institute. And she said, hey, we want to just talk to you about our plans for low income housing in Lakewood. I said, really? And she goes, yeah, we have something under contract. I said, really? Where might that be? News to me. And apparently they have the Candlewood Suites under contract at 10720 Pack Highway Southwest. And so for whatever reason, even though, the horses left the barn, they'd like to chat a little bit about it. And it sounds like Mr. Bueller is going to meet with them and chat about it. And I think Mr. Caulfield probably knows something of it, but it came a bit of a surprise that they are allegedly investing to some significant degree in Lakewood. It would be interesting to know what their ask is going to be for operational monies, because it seems like they're having challenges with the location they have up in the Seattle, King County area for the tiny house program that they're sponsoring. Yeah.
They have a habit of putting things under contract without having the capital.
Correct.
So expect them to come ask for a couple $1 million of ARPA funding to fund their acquisition. And together with a non-binding commitment to pay the operational expenses.
Mhm.
And then they'll come back for the operational expenses.
Because they're out of operational monies up in King County, and they were aggrieved that they didn't get approved from that funding application process. Yeah. So anyway, more to follow. It sounds like city staff is on top of it. I wasn't, because it was the first I heard of it today. But I'm sure more will come of that, and I'll certainly keep everyone informed. I am attending the LASA event on Wednesday. They have their big breakfast fundraiser, and I've been asked to kind of open some remarks on that. So I look forward to chatting with the folks who are supportive of LASA. They do good things in the community, so I'm happy to be there. It's in McGavick Center. It's on Wednesday morning. I think it starts at 7:30. Yeah. So that should be great. And as Brianna told us last week, and I think Todd just told us tonight, there are lots of events coming up in the next 2 weeks. So we'll get that listing for all of you, and as best as we can to attend, and that would be awesome. And that is all I have, I think. I will be here. Yeah. I won't be here on Friday, but I will be here on Monday. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Deputy Mayor.
I failed to say that I did do the ribbon cutting for the new reopening of the Lakewood Elks.
How was that?
It was very nice, very small, nothing compared to what you were exposed to. But new management, the biggest remodel that I noticed was in the bathrooms, but they have lots of things scheduled, like they're bringing back the bingo and different things. So I just want to make sure that that was on
Great.
record. And I also just read, I have an email from Maya Thomas, and she's looking to, through our free search tool and database of Alzheimer's care
I
facilities.
saw that.
Did you get that?
I forwarded that on to Mr. Caulfield and I think Ms. Kraus
Okay, good.
and Mr. Copriva. It was a communications thing where they wanted to put information about Alzheimer's, the issue, condition, and resources on our website. And so I sent that to staff to review for appropriateness.
Well, I'm glad I mentioned it. I
Yeah.
will forward it. Thank you.
Well, I got another thing about whether we should be supporting the mayor's pledge for the monarch butterfly. I mean, it's an important thing, but there are, all sorts of stuff out there. But, if we can do something supportive, I suppose we could take a look at that. I have never seen a monarch butterfly since I've lived here. Used to have them a lot in Oregon. We had a lot of them down there. We could probably do something positive for that.
That's a resolution protecting cocoons.
Yeah, I've never seen one since I've lived here, but maybe that's the reason why we should support it. Yeah, exactly. Could be. Probably not a bad thing. So I'll let you know about that. I got to make a decision before April 30th on that to be part of the mayor's pledge around the nation for support. Okay, anything else? If not, thank you for your apt attention tonight, and we'll see you next week.